All right, hello and welcome to the show that has no name. I am your host who does have a name, and it is Pannobhasa. And I have been asked several times, I think by now, if I was going to read more of my favorite Buddhist texts. And so I'm going to read three texts from the Atthakavagga, which I translated back in the late 90s. And I'll do a little bit of commentary also, but for starters, I'll just read the very first text of the Atthakavagga, which is Discourse on Objects of Desire, or the Kama Sutta, which in Sanskrit would be Kama Sutra, which is a very different text than this one. It's the shortest text of the Atthakavagga because they are organized in accordance with the length of the sutta. So this one's only 6 verses long. So without further ado, the Discourse on Objects of Desire. If it prospers for one desiring objects of desire, the fellow, of course, becomes exhilarated in mind, having got what he wants. If for a person desiring, with strong preference aroused, those objects of desire dwindle away, he is distressed as though pierced with a spike. Whoever avoids objects of desire as with one's foot the head of a snake, he, being mindful, transcends this attachment in the world. Whatever man is greedy for fields, property, or gold, cows and horses, slaves and servants, women, relations, various objects of desire, the powerless overpower him, troubles press him down. Thus unease comes to him like water into a broken boat. So a person, always mindful, should avoid objects of desire. Having abandoned them, he would cross the flood like one who has gone to the other shore, having bailed out his boat. So that's the sutta, and before reading the next one, I'll do a little bit of commentary on this. For starters, I would say it's just a very basic Buddhist teaching on avoiding sensual pleasures. Unlike the Sanskrit Kama Sutra, which is instructions on how to pursue sensual pleasures. And there are also a number of themes that are common in early Buddhism. Like in verse 2, it says, if for a person desiring with strong preference aroused, those objects of desire dwindle away. He is distressed as though pierced with a spike. And the word that's translated as spike here is salla, S-A-L-L-A. And it's a recurring theme in the Atthakavagga. Apparently was a common metaphor in very early Buddhism that eventually fell from grace or just came out of style or something. But the spike that is mentioned also elsewhere in the Sutta Nipata and probably other suttas also, it's essentially dukkha. It's just the mental state that causes dukkha. It's called a kind of barb or spike or something small and pointy that sticks into your heart, and it just causes you to be restless and just running in all directions insatiably. So probably as I read more suttas from the Sutta Nipata that I'll be mentioning the spike again. And also there's the very famous simile or metaphor of the boat at the bottom. Having abandoned them, he would cross the flood like one who has gone to the other shore, having bailed out his boat. And that's also a very common metaphor or symbol in very early Buddhism. But it's a very simple one. That the Kama Sutta is relatively simple and straightforward. So I'll just move on to the next one, which is one of my favorite suttas. And it's in a way it's well, obviously it's pre-Theravadin. So I'll just read it and you can see for yourself. It is the 8-verse discourse on the ultimate, the Paramasa Sutta. And it begins, abiding in views, thinking it is the ultimate, a person makes out one in the world to be outstanding. Therefore he says that all others are inferior. Thus he has not passed beyond contentions. whatever advantage he sees for himself in the seen, in the heard, in morality and observances, or in the felt, he having seized upon that very thing there, views all others to be inferior. But adept ones call that a tie dependent upon which he views another to be inferior. So upon the seen, the heard, or the felt, or upon morality and observances, a mendicant would not depend. Also, he would not conceive a view in the world based on knowledge or also morality and observances. He would not present himself as equal, nor would he imagine to be inferior or superior. Having abandoned what was acquired, not taking up anything, he would not be in dependence even upon knowledge. He truly is not a partisan among the schoolmen. He does not fall back on any view at all. For whom there is no intent here for either extreme, for this or that existence, here or hereafter, for him there are no entrenchments, seized, having discriminated from among the philosophies. By him here, in the seen, the heard, or the felt, there is not contrived even the slightest perception. That holy man not adopting a view, by what here in the world would one judge him? They conceive nothing, they set nothing before them. Also, no philosophies are received by them. A holy man is not to be led on by morality and observances. Gone to the other shore, one who is such does not fall back. And that's the end of the sutta. And this one is much more subtle than the first one that I read. Throughout the Atthakavagga, there are lots of puns and other plays on words, and there are some of them in this, which made it relatively difficult to translate. Sometimes I would spend just weeks just racking my brains on how to express all of the different possible meanings of a word, like in a play on words, using an English equivalent. So for example, at the end, when it says, gone to the other shore, one who is such does not fall back. That one who is such is a play on words. The term that I translated that way is tadi, which it's kind of reminiscent of Tathagata. Like the Tathagata it's a name for the Buddha, and it means one who has become such. And such is a kind of, not quite a euphemism, but it's a word that is implying that you can't really put into words the state of an enlightened being. So you just say one who is such, or one who is like this. Although also, of course, one who is such here can also refer to just the person, the sage, who is being described in the sutta. But you'll notice that this is probably also pre-Theravadin. I mean, this is considered to be one of the oldest suttas in the Pali Canon. Just the 4 Atthaka suttas, the 4 8-verse suttas of the Atthakavagga are considered to be very archaic. And it's essentially saying don't believe anything, which of course goes against orthodox Theravada, saying that you have to have a right view. You have to believe this set of doctrines or you've got wrong view. And before that philosophy crystallized, it was really, Buddhism was just really emphasizing the importance of not clinging to any view at all. And it's not exactly nihilism, it's not exactly skepticism, it's more mysticism that is emphasizing, or at least implying, that reality cannot be expressed in symbols. Once you symbolize reality, you've just got symbols and you're not dealing with reality anymore. So there is that, and also there's the whole idea of not considering yourself to be superior or inferior or even equal. All of those are considered to be kinds of conceit, and that's pretty much every view you can have on self, at least comparing yourself to somebody else's self. I mean, you're better, higher, lower, or equal, and all of them are excluded or at least discouraged. So this is really like a central theme of the Atthakavagga, which, as I say, is one of the oldest Buddhist texts in existence. I consider it to be possibly the most important Buddhist document in existence, just because it is such a large chunk of really archaic Buddhism that is really pre-Theravadin. It's pre anything that exists nowadays. To some extent, there are a lot of like the seeds of Majjhimaka, of like Mahayana philosophy. And I have read that it's sometimes called proto-Majjhimaka, some of the philosophy of the Atthakavagga. So that's good news for some Mahayana Buddhists, at least, because it shows that like Pragya-paramita and the philosophy of Nagarjuna has roots going all the way back to even pre-Theravada, although I would say most Mahayana philosophy cannot make that claim. And so now I'm going to read one last one for this video, which is another one of my favorites, one of my favorite Pali Suttas, and it's the Discourse to Maganda, or the Magandya Sutta. And this is not to be confused with a different Magandya Sutta, which I think is in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's very different, and it's similar to the second one I read, the Paramasa Sutta. It has similar themes to it. And so I'll read this. First, the Buddha speaks. Having seen craving, dissatisfaction, and passion, there did not occur even an inclination to sexuality. Just what is this, full of urine and dung? I would not want to touch it even with my foot. Then Maganda speaks. If you do not want a treasure such as this, a woman desired by many lords of men, what belief, what morality and observances, what way of life, and what kind of rebirth into existence do you declare? There is nothing of which I say, I declare this, Maganda, said the Blessed One, seized having discriminated from among the philosophies, but looking among the views, not taking hold of anything, examining, I saw inner peace. Whatever discriminations have been conceived, said Maganda, truly, O sage, you speak of them without taking hold. This inner peace, whatever it means, how is it made known by the wise? Not by what is viewed, not by what is heard, not by inner knowledge, Maganda, said the Blessed One, nor by morality and observances is purity said to be. By absence of what is viewed, by absence of what is heard, by non-knowledge, by amorality, by non-observance, also not by that. So having let go of these, not taking hold of anything, a peaceful one, not being dependent, would not have longings for existence. If you say that not by what is viewed, not by what is heard, not by inner knowledge, said Maganda, nor by morality and observances is purity said to be, by absence of what is viewed, by absence of what is heard, by non-knowledge, by amorality, by non-observance, also not by that, then I imagine that to be a confused philosophy indeed. Some do rely on purity by view. And having depended upon view, inquiring, Maganda, said the Blessed One, you have become confounded by what you have seized upon, and so you have not seen the slightest sense in this. Therefore you hold it to be confused. He who imagines the existence of equal, superior, or inferior would contend with regard to that. To one not vacillating among three distinctions, there occurs no equal or superior. What would that holy man argue, saying it is true? Or with regard to what would he contend, saying it is false? For whom there is neither equal nor unequal, with whom would he engage in argument? A sage, having abandoned his home, going without fixed abode, not working up intimacies in a village, rid of objects of desire, setting nothing before him, would not take up a position and make debate with the people. From whatever things he has detached himself, as he would roam through the world, not taking hold of them, a great one would not put forth an argument. Just as a white lotus whose stalk arises from the water is not mired by water and mud, even so a sage, a speaker of peace, one without greed, is not mired by sensuality in the world. One who has realized does not come to conceit through what is viewed or felt, for he is not made up of that. He is not to be led on by what is done or heard either. He is not brought to a conclusion among entrenchments. There are no ties for one dispassion toward perception. There are no confusions for one released by understanding. But those who have grabbed hold of perception and view, roam through the world causing trouble. And that's the end of the sutta. And one theme that is definitely pre-Theravadin in this and also in the preceding sutta is the whole idea that morality and observances is really not going to purify you. And this is, it's like an archaic doctrine that had to get modified in Orthodox Theravada. It's called Silabata paramasa, or clinging to morality and observances. And in the Theravadin commentarial tradition, it pretty much perverts Silabata into obviously ridiculous practices like imitating cows and dogs. There were some ascetics in ancient India that considered animals to be in a state of purity, sort of like Adam and Eve before they ate the apple. And so by imitating them, even to the extent of going around on all fours and being naked and not speaking and eating without the use of your hands and so forth, that they were somehow reclaiming a kind of primordial purity that could get them into heaven at least. But that's really obviously not what Silabata is referring to. It's referring to adhering to any kind of code, like a list of rules that you have to follow. And if you break one of those rules, then somehow you are impure and messed up. And it's really not what early Buddhism was teaching, that you can't really depend upon following rules to purify you. Although also here in this sutta it says not following rules isn't going to purify you either. In fact, nothing worldly is going to purify you, because the world is essentially what's keeping you impure. And by the world, I don't mean something necessarily external. I just mean just samsara in general. So it's like a Zen koan, some of this, that not what is viewed, not what is heard, not inner knowledge, not morality and observances, and nor the opposite of those is going to purify you. So it would seem that nothing is going to purify you, although to some degree there's the Mahayana statement that we're already pure in essence, or deep, deep down, and it's all the impurities are perceptual things at the surface. And I think the Atthakavagga would not really disagree with that, to the extent that it wouldn't, I mean, it might not accept any philosophy, obviously, because that's knowledge or whatever that also isn't going to purify you. So there is some merit to the idea that very early Buddhism was very similar to like ancient Greek skepticism, but it wasn't based on the idea that you can't really know reality, which is what skepticism, at least what skepticism turned into in the West. Just the insistence that you can't really know the truth. In Buddhism, you can know the truth. It's just that you're not going to know it by thinking or feeling. It's like the dark faith of St. John of the Cross. It's just something that's right there in the center, and it's just there regardless of any kind of thinking or feeling or anything else. And it's somehow tuning into that, just being mindful and like quiet enough that you can just know that. But once you cling to it as some kind of knowledge, then it becomes inner knowledge, and you've just rendered it largely invalid. So those of you who listen to this, and who know Theravada Buddhism, may realize that this really is not Orthodox Theravada. And that's one reason why it's not as well known as it used to be. The Atthakavagga used to be very well known, and most, if not all, ancient schools of Buddhism have their own version of it, including the Mahayana schools. At least one or two of the suttas of the Atthakavagga were encouraged or like recommended reading on Ashokan edicts. So they were well known, but as Theravada philosophy evolved and became more based on you have to believe this set of doctrines as right view, then obviously the Atthakavagga just didn't fit in. And one bit of evidence that the Atthakavagga is so old is that it's one of the only parts of the entire Pali Tipitaka that is so old that it has a commentary that is also canonical, and that's the Nidesa, or the Mahanidesa. And that's the Mahanidesa is one of the few Pali texts that, as far as I know, has never been translated into English. And the main reason for that is almost nobody reads it. The main purpose of the Mahanidesa is to reinterpret the Atthakavagga into orthodox Theravada, which involves lots of stretching and twisting and ridiculousness. Like when it says a monk should have no view, the commentarial tradition of the Nidesa just says, well, when it says that a monk should have no view, what it means is he should have no wrong view, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, why would the Buddha even instruct monks, don't believe what is wrong? I mean, that should just go without saying. Also, I guess before I end this, I should explain the very first verse of this. It's based on a famous story in which the Buddha was very rude to somebody, where he's saying, having seen craving, dissatisfaction, and passion, there did not occur even an inclination to sexuality. Just what is this, full of urine and dung? I would not want to touch it even with my foot. So the story, of course, is that there was this rich Brahmin who had a beautiful daughter, and he didn't consider any man to be worthy of this goddess of a daughter. And then one day he sees the Buddha sitting in a park in meditation, and he looked so noble and serene and superior that he figured, well, this man is good enough for my daughter. So he brings the goddess of a daughter to the Buddha, and then he just looks at her and says he would not want to touch this thing full of urine and dung even with his foot, which just mortally offended the daughter, and she hated him for the rest of her life, although the mere shock value was sufficient to trigger a kind of it's the two parents eventually became Sotapannas just due to the shock value of this. So you could say it was skillful means. He sacrificed one potential follower, the daughter, in order to convert the two parents. But according to tradition, the daughter didn't hate him for the rest of her life, which is kind of understandable. And the having seen craving, dissatisfaction, and passion, that's usually translated as the three daughters of Mara. Like according to the legend, the three daughters of Mara, or the Buddhist devil, were trying to seduce or at least distract the Buddha on the night that he became the Buddha, the night that he became enlightened. And their Pali names are Tahna, Arati, and Raga. Tahna is craving, usually translated as craving. Arati is like dissatisfaction, and Raga is usually translated as lust. So those are the three daughters. And I think it's possible that he might just be referring to the three states, and that this very ancient sutta was the origin of the three names of the three daughters of Mara who were trying to seduce him on the night of his enlightenment, and so on. So it's one of the evidences that the Atthakavagga is very old, as it contains almost no fairy tale narratives, and even just the mentioning of craving, dissatisfaction, and passion. It's not necessarily, at least at the time of its composition, describing three daughters of Mara. It may be that it was because of this that it got interpreted that the three daughters of Mara had these three names, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. It's just hypothetical. So I guess that's pretty much it. I don't have a whole heck of a lot more to say other than people who know Theravada philosophy and who read the literal translations, not just like interpretations of it to make them in accordance with Orthodox Theravada. If you read what is literally said, you can see that it really is not Orthodox Theravada. It's pre-Orthodox or pre-Theravada. And the very fact that this exists, it does seem to indicate that Buddhist philosophy did evolve quite a lot before it became orthodox. Just the whole idea of not believing anything, um, which, as I say, is not really skepticism. It's just the acknowledgement that um, beliefs cannot contain reality. That, I mean, reality cannot be symbolized. So it's just like people just can't deal with that. Most people, especially when Buddhism started becoming a popular religion, it started becoming like a national religion in India, ancient India. At least by Ashoka's time, it was becoming like the number one spiritual system in India. Um, it's just too nebulous. I mean, people just can't take it. I mean, even like a philosopher, maybe like especially a philosopher, they've got to have some kind of system that they can work on. Um, it may be that they're just not into meditating all the time and being like hardcore ascetics. By the time a spiritual system starts becoming popular, it's attracting intellectuals who are going to be sitting around in monasteries and universities formulating theories. And there's really not a whole lot of theories you can formulate with regard to not believing anything, because the theories just become just another set of beliefs. Nagarjuna, I think, was returning to this kind of philosophy, and as I said, the Atthakavagga sometimes has been referred to as proto-Majjhimaka. Um, so I think Nagarjuna did about the best that a philosopher, like an intellectual, can do with regard to um, archaic Buddhist philosophy, which is just using logic and reason to attack itself and just leaving nothing behind, just leaving behind emptiness. So I guess that's good enough. We're going almost half an hour already. So I just thought I would read some of my favorite suttas from the Atthakavagga, and I'll probably read a few more in the near future. And be happy.